It is chilling how comfortable Republicans are with Trump ignoring federal, state, and local judges.
Court rulings about all the fired probationary workers. You used the same language here just now that was in the statement about fighting back against that ruling. Do you mean appealing or something else? And does the administration plan to comply with those orders in the meantime?
Fighting back by appealing, fighting back by using the full weight of the White House counsel's office and our lawyers at the federal government who believe that this injunction is entirely unconstitutional. And it is, for anybody who has a basic understanding of the law. You cannot have a low-level district court judge filing an injunction to usurp the executive authority of the President of the United States. That is completely absurd. And as the executive of the executive branch, the President has the ability to fire or hire. And you have these lower-level judges who are trying to block this President's agenda. It's very clear. And as I just cited, I was appalled by the statistic when I saw it this morning. In 1 month, in February, there have been 15 injunctions of this administration in our agenda. In 3 years under the Biden administration, there were 14 injunctions. So it's very clear that there are judicial activists throughout our judicial branch who are trying to block this president's executive authority. We are going to fight back. And as anyone who saw President Trump and his legal team fighting back, they know how to do it. He was indicted nearly 200 times, and he's in the Oval Office now because all of the indictments, all of these injunctions have always been unconstitutional and unfair. They are led by partisan activists who are trying to usurp the will of this president, and we're not going to stand for it.
They all have to go back and learn civics because that is not right. That's White House Press Secretary and apparently amateur constitutional lawyer Karoline Leavitt reacting to the news that 2 separate federal judges ruled this week that the Trump administration illegally fired tens of thousands of federal workers across several agencies and that they must be reinstated. One of the lawsuits came from a coalition of 20 state attorneys general from across the country. I repeat, these were state attorneys general. So when Republicans tell you that they want to give the power back to the people, well, this is what it looks like. This is why it's so important to pay attention and to vote, not just in your federal elections, but in your local and state races, because these are the people that are actually getting things done.
You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m., but he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing, a verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well,
in the air?
there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court. Sean.
Hey, so on Friday, the president suggested at length that it should be illegal to criticize judges, but he has repeatedly criticized judges who rule against him, and Elon Musk is calling for impeachment of judges who have opposed the administration. So how are those two things not in conflict?
I have not heard the president talk about impeaching judges. I know you mentioned Mr. Musk's tweet, but I have not heard the president of the United States ask that. Mary.
Hey, thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask about this video that I saw this morning set to the tune of, I believe, Closing Time, about deportations of illegal migrants. What's the strategy behind the White House's videos they've been putting out on this, and can you kind of talk us through the thinking on these videos?
Sure. I think the White House and our entire government clearly is leaning into the message of this president, and we are unafraid to double down and to take responsibility and ownership of the serious decisions that are being made. The president was elected with an overwhelming mandate to launch the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and that's exactly what he is doing. And to this very day, we are now, I think, 56 or 7 days into the administration by my count. The president still receives an overwhelming public support for the policies that he is enacting. So we are unafraid to message effectively what the president is doing on a daily basis to make our community safer. And the specific video you referenced, I think it sums up our immigration policy pretty well. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
I have one other question, but I want to follow up on Katie's question, actually. You said the mass deportation campaign would continue, but she asked about the flights specifically. Will those flights to El Salvador continue while this case is being appealed?
We don't have any flights planned specifically, but we will continue with the mass deportations. And I would just like to point out that the judge in this case is essentially trying to say that the president doesn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists from our American soil. That is an egregious abuse of the bench. This judge does not have that authority. It is the opinion of this White House and of this administration, and that's why we're fighting this in court. And it's very, very clear that this is an activist judge who is trying to usurp the president's authority. Under the Alien Enemies Act, the president has this power, and that's why this deportation campaign has continued. And this judge, Judge Boasberg, is a Democrat activist. He was appointed by Barack Obama. His wife has donated more than $10,000 to Democrats, and he has consistently shown his disdain for this president and his policies, and it's unacceptable.
Right where I wanted to go about the idea that these people are all foreign terrorists, but Judge Boasberg was originally appointed by George W. Bush and then elevated by Barack Obama. I just feel like I should clear that up.
And so we have, unfortunately, Sean, a judicial branch that has gotten so out of control. You have single judges in single cities in lower courts trying to determine the way in which the president handles foreign relations. They cannot be allowed to do that. If we live in a country where the will of the American people is subverted by a single judge in a single court, we no longer live in a democracy.
Do you plan to comply with the judge's order regarding rehiring the federal workers?
What are you talking about?
The Clinton appointee judge that ruled that the federal government has to rehire the fired federal workers. Do you plan to comply
Well,
with that?
I think it's absolutely. I have nothing to do with that other than I heard about the decision. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. It's a judge that's putting himself in the position of the President of the United States, who was elected by close to 80 million votes. And you have that. You're having more and more of that. It's a very dangerous thing for our country. And I would suspect that we're going to have to get a decision from the Supreme Court. But that's a very dangerous decision for our country. And these are people, in many cases, they don't show up for work. Nobody even knows if they exist. And a judge wants us to pay them even if they don't know they exist. If they exist. And I don't think that's going to be happening, but we'll have to see. I don't know. You have to speak to the lawyers about that.
We made a promise to the American people. The President Trump has made a promise to the American people. We're going to make this country safe again. I wake up every morning loving my job because I work for the greatest president in the history of my life, and we're going to make this country safe again. I'm proud to be a part of this administration. We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
Yeah. I just love seeing you going through these protesters just crunching on the apple as their liberal tears just flood the hallway.
Trump was always going to bend the law and the Constitution as far as he possibly could. He spent his whole life getting away with things that seemed completely at odds with basic morality, manipulating loopholes, skirting accountability, and leveraging power to protect himself from any consequences. That much was never in question. What's frustrating is how few Republicans, and even Democrats these days, seem willing to stand up and fight back in a meaningful way. Too many in the GOP have either embraced Trump's authoritarian instincts or stayed silent out of fear of political retribution. They've excused, downplayed, or outright defended actions that would have been unthinkable in any previous era. Meanwhile, Democrats, despite often calling out his corruption, have frequently hesitated when it comes to taking real decisive action to actually hold him accountable. Whether it's fear of political backlash, an unwillingness to rise to the moment that we're in, or maybe a misguided hope that norms alone will save democracy, the result is the same. If no one is willing to stand up and enforce the rules, then the rules stop mattering. The rules really stop existing. The question isn't just how far Trump will go, it's how much the country will let him get away with.